very much, Vladimir. It's a big pleasure for me to join you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks.
On behalf of the EUA, can I congratulate you on a very impressive meeting and under very difficult circumstances. And I wish you a lot of luck and success. I should explain first the EUA, just who we are. It's the organization that represents the universities of Europe. We have some 850 members across 48 countries of the higher education area. So about 2/3 from the European Union and the rest from all other parts of Europe. And our role is to represent the university's views, to advocate with governments and the Commission, to share best practices, good practices across the universities, and of course to represent Europe at global fora on education. So it's a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the universities in Europe. Now, I probably don't have to tell this audience, it's specialized and probably comprised of very interested people, that the SDGs are the most significant, the most important, and certainly the most urgent objectives for humanity in 2020. And when they were agreed some 5 years ago at the United Nations, it was a remarkable achievement. And I suppose I should say that as an Irishman, I take a certain pride in the fact that at the United Nations, the whole process was led by the Irish ambassador and the ambassador of Kenya, David Donoghue and Mashiara Kamau. And it was their task on behalf of the Secretary General to negotiate an agreement with the governments of the world. So it was a long process. It was a complex set of negotiations, lots of trade-offs and lots of compromises. But we have this blueprint for the next 10 years at this point. And the SDGs, they provide a remarkable opportunity for universities to showcase to society the critical role that we play, while at the same time serving society in addressing the challenges. And we have a really crucial role to play in the meeting of the SDG targets. And I would also say that without university success, the achievement of the goals will not likely be successful either. So we have a really major responsibility in this area. And this morning I'm going to talk a little bit about the addressing them from the point of view of the challenges that are posed to university leadership. So I'm sure other speakers probably have covered or will cover many of these matters, but just a short summary. The universities can contribute to meeting the SDG targets in a whole range of ways. First and foremost, we train many, if not most, of the professionals who in their careers will implement the changes that are needed. And all disciplines have a role to play in this regard. But it is important that our graduates leave our universities today and into the future with a knowledge of the SDGs and an understanding of the roles that each of them can play in meeting the goals. And above all, I think, having a personal set of values that honor the goals. And that's part of the formative responsibility of universities. Needless to say, our research creates the knowledge that's necessary to overcome many of the challenges. And we also, of course, deliver the evidence to support interventions, to critically evaluate the impact of interventions, and of course, to inform public policy. And in our third mission, our engagement with regional society, businesses, trade unions, cultural organizations, civic and political bodies, media, we have the opportunity to influence all other societal stakeholders to adopt better practices and policies. And in the manner in which we implement the goals ourselves on our campuses, we are role models who can influence the attitudes and the actions of others in society. In a practical sense, the SDGs can, of course, provide the very main framework for integrating in a holistic way all of our missions. It's certainly important that we embrace the principles, the values, and the aims of sustainability in our university strategies, in our policies, and in our actions, always weighing, of course, the economic, social, and environmental needs. So we have to have a careful balance, though, between strategic steering of research and education, with the need to retain freedom of individual academics and researchers to choose their own fields of inquiry. So this is a delicate balance, steering and at the same time preserving individual academic autonomy. I have to emphasize that interdisciplinary approaches will be particularly important because new discoveries often happen at the interface between disciplines. And in our universities, we must lead by example in promoting social cohesion, which is a major element of the SDG, all SDGs. So we have to embrace people from all backgrounds, reflecting the diversity of society. So access to universities must be equitable, and it must be open to all who qualify. And we must welcome students and staff from all backgrounds. We must promote sustainable practices then on our campuses and ensure that our teaching and learning at all times emphasizes the goals. So a question that I might ask at this point is, how do we embrace an SDG culture in our universities if we haven't already achieved that? And in the first instance, my view is that responsibility lies foremost at the top with the rector or the president, the university leadership. Some of you may remember the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a 19th century American philosopher, who made a very simple statement that very often an organization is but the lengthened shadow of one man. Now, of course, that was written before gender equality became the norm and became an SDG itself. But the message was clear that primary responsibility rests with the leadership in the university. And that means having a plan and making sure that the plan is implemented. Now, I was a rector for 10 years myself, and I learned some things. I'm going to share some of my personal learning. It's not easy sometimes to mobilize the commitment of academic staff who are generally very busy. They're burdened with work, often with diminishing resources or insufficient resources, and who over time become somewhat skeptical at the appearance of yet another responsibility on top of an ever-expanding menu in this century. So how do we motivate staff to embrace the SDG challenge? And my first response, based on my personal learning, is that we harness the power of our students and the ingenuity of student leaders. Because leadership, of course, in the university community doesn't reside solely in the rector's office. In numbers, students dominate our communities, and they are very energetic and they're idealistic, as are their leaders, because their generation, of course, has most to lose if we don't succeed. In their lifetimes, they will be most at risk for the consequences of failure, whether it be climate change or social upheaval or contagions, pandemics, economic decline, and so on. And there's also the positive perspective that in many countries, students coming into universities are already programmed to take the lead. Personal experience. I became a rector here. I'm speaking this morning from Ireland in 2007. And I was challenged early by the students. And they said, President, we have spent nearly 14 years in schools, primary schools and secondary schools, and committed to the green agenda, because our schools have been flying green flags provided by the Federation for Environmental Education. And these flags signify that we in our schools have been committed to recycling, waste management, water economies, energy saving. Where's your flag? What are you doing in this university for this agenda? Why not the same commitment as we have in our schools for the past 2 decades? So for those who are not familiar with it, the FEE program, the Federation for Environmental Education, is headquartered in Copenhagen, and it has been operating now for 28 years in 60,000 schools in 70 countries, influencing 20 million young children. Ukraine, by the way, joined back in 2016. And over the years now, millions of young people who have graduated through that culture have come onto our campuses, and they are programmed to be champions for the SDGs. So in my experience, back in 2007, we had to get to work. The students took control of the agenda, and the staff, I encouraged the staff of the university and buildings and estates and academics to adopt the agenda of the green flag and of the students coming through. And we cut our waste, and we cut our energy consumption, and we reduced water consumption, and we began to grow our own vegetables on university land to reduce carbon footprint, and to consume food that had gone beyond its sell-by date, but which was still actually very nutritious, and to walk and to cycle to classes rather than to drive, and to champion new courses across the university and curriculum modules on sustainable living. So the students, working with the staff, led the change in culture and heightened the awareness of everybody for this entire agenda of planetary sustainability. And then in 2003 years in, working with the FEE, we created the new Eco Campus program. So I was happy to say in my university, we flew the first green flag on a university campus in the world. And this has grown. So 10 years later, you can find green flags in universities in 26 countries joining this program. Now, that's a very simple matter. But can I say that the symbolism is important? If you fly this in on the most important building in the center of your campus, you're making a statement, and you're a beacon for people who visit. And we saw here the osmotic effect of this when the largest hospital in the city decided to embrace the same agenda. And in 2016, it became the first hospital in the world flying the green flag. So we underestimate the power of the university to influence society, and we underestimate the importance of simple symbolic gestures in changing a culture. So I'd recommend to universities that are challenged, as we were at that time, to consider just a simple initiative of this kind, working with the students. Now, the second point beyond where responsibility lies, the second point I want to emphasize, of course, is the importance of having a plan, a formal plan. Universities globally now exhibit strategic plans. You can find them on all the websites. But it is hugely important that the plan should have the SDGs at the very forefront of institutional objectives. Many universities, I'm pleased to say, at least EUA members, now have plans that focus on SDGs, and some of them have specific sustainability strategies on their website, setting out how they intend to embed the SDGs in their culture and in their practices. And of course, the very act of designing a framework, a strategic framework, consulting with the members of the university community, that itself challenges assumptions and attitudes and is transformational. Very important then to emphasize this point, that in drawing up a plan, that the process must be inclusive of all staff, of students, and of the university stakeholders. And it begins with institutional mapping. What are the strengths of the university in disciplines that are relevant to the SDGs? In fact, of course, the answer is practically all are. What research programs have you got already that you can map onto the SDG framework and perhaps tweak to address the SDGs? Very important that there's a set of targets, and they, of course, will be selected by each university appropriate to the strengths of the university and the context. Many will be, of course, share similarities with plans of other universities, but of course, each institution must aim to emphasize its own individual strengths and recognize what its resource limitations are. So a top-down and bottom-up approach. At EUA, we have been encouraging our national rectors' conferences to play a role in fostering this initiative, promoting it among their members, but also ensuring that universities in each of the conferences share their expertise, collaborate, and partner. Just a practical point, if anybody is setting out today to develop an institutional plan, I would recommend a good document from the Australians. It's a couple of years old at this stage. It's entitled Getting Started with the SDGs in Universities. And it was developed by the Australasian campuses towards sustainability. And they've worked with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network linked to the United Nations. It's on their website, but it's a good starting point. So, culture, a plan. And the third challenge is implementation. And that's where the rubber hits the road, as the Americans say. A plan, of course, is valuable only if it's challenging and yet achievable, and where there is regular measurement of progress. And again, a bit of personal learning, a tactic. Those of us who work in universities realize that academic staff and students tend to be competitive. They enjoy matching their peers. Universities pride themselves in being better than the other universities. It's perhaps a failing, but at the same time, it can be exploited. Back in 2010, the University of Indonesia in Jakarta had a very clever idea and initiated global university rankings based on green metrics. Now, rankings can be useful, they can be motivators, or they can be destructive. It depends on the relevance of their metrics, the validity of the measures, and the ease of verification of the data. And they're evolving. The UI green metrics focused initially on ecological performance of campuses, but they have evolved. And today there are some 60 metrics addressing the scale and relevance of teaching programs on the SDGs, scale and quality of research on the SDGs, as well as the green campus metrics. This raised awareness across the globe in the university sector, and today almost 1,000 universities participate in that ranking system. Some of the most prestigious in the world have joined, and about 100 new universities sign up every year. The good thing about this particular ranking approach, and there's a second one I'll mention in a moment, is that it stimulates university communities to measure each year the progress that they have made, and also stimulates universities to be creative, new ideas that will make them more competitive in the following years. And of course, there's always the reputational risk or reputational enhancement that flows from good performance. And more recently, in 2017, the World University Rankings also joined the SDG agenda by introducing impact rankings. More comprehensive, more onerous and time-consuming in data submission, there are almost enough metrics for every university to be able to say that it's the best in the world at something. So it is my personal experience that if engaging with submissions does lead to more effective implementation of strategy and policy. So participation is a tactical driver for adherence to the SDG agenda. My last piece of personal learning is that it is critical that on each campus there is a specific champion of the SDGs in the management team. A senior academic who is enthused, who is empowered, charged with overseeing implementation, monitoring progress, and reporting regularly to the university, to the outside world, and to ranking systems. I tended to use the term the SDG czar on our campus, but it works. So concluding my remarks, reiterating there's no greater challenge to the world in 2020 and to the universities of the world than engagement and delivery of the Sustainability Development Goals. Many universities are making great progress, but still, I have to say, many have a lot to do. Some are excellent, and many have expertise to share with those who are later to the agenda. For me, the elements that are critical for success are committed leadership of both staff and students, a stretching plan, an attainable plan, one that is coherent with integration of all the 17 goals, embedded in the culture, the curriculum, the research agenda, and university operations. Remember the value of peer pressure in overcoming obstacles. Exploit the ranking systems to shape creativity and performance. And my last comment is to tell you that, of course, EUA is very active in this space. And coming up in February 18th and 19th, we organized the European Forum on Learning and Teaching. It was scheduled for Bilbao, but now it's going to be online. And the topic this year will be Sustainable Learning and Teaching. And there are lots of presentations and workshops from universities across Europe who have been innovating in this area. So you're all very welcome to register. And the good news, it's free. So thank you very much for having me. And I wouldn't call this a keynote address, more a conversational piece.